We have such a hard time to remember this. Such a hard time. But it's real simple. We're children. He's dad. Now, we're going to talk about this idea of crucifying yourself now. And we're going to use the Prodigal Son story. Okay? We'll close on this today. So here in the story of the Prodigal Son, most of you know this story, right? In Luke chapter 15. This is one of the all-time favorites. People love this one. If we look in Luke chapter 15, we have an amazing story going on here. You have, in verses 11 and 12, you have Jesus starting it off saying, okay, there's a man who has 2 sons. The younger comes to him, in this picture up in the upper left, says to the father, hey, I want all my stuff. All the portion of the goods that should be mine, I want you to give them to me now. And it's the younger son. Right away, he's telling this story now to the Pharisees and Sadducees, to the Jews. He's not talking to his disciples. And right away, they know something. If a younger son demands his inheritance while the father's still alive, you stone him to death. Because it's blasphemy. It's always the older son who gets the inheritance. That's why Jacob and Esau had such a problem, right? So what's happening here, he's telling a story where right away, the Jews, the leaders, are right away hating the younger son because they know the law. And then it gets worse, because what happens is he takes all that stuff, all the goods, and he goes and has sex with a bunch of different women, he goes and parties it all away, and now he's broke. Can you imagine the religious leaders listening to this? And then it says, after he's spent all, in the upper right corner, there's a famine, he's in want, he's starving to death. And he actually joins himself to a pig farmer. Couldn't be worse, because Jews are not allowed to eat pork. So Jesus is telling a story here that's just getting them boiling mad. I mean, they're just listening to this going, this isn't even just a bad son, this is like the worst of the worst. And then it says, as he's reading in verse 17, he comes to himself and he says, how many of my father's servants who live with my father have enough food to spare? And he says to himself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not even going to go back and ask my dad to be his son again. He doesn't say that. He goes, I'll just be a servant with the other servants. So when Jesus tells this story, he's saying the son actually realizes, he thinks in his mind he can't be with his father anymore. But maybe he could be a servant. Okay? So, of course, what happens is the same thing with the rich young ruler when he comes running. The father sees him, and what he says is he says, bring all this out to my son because he was dead and he's alive. Right? And he tells this story. What's the purpose of telling this story, you think? It's the same mistake we made earlier. We focused on the son and not the father. The story is about God the Father, really. The purpose of the son is this idea if he realizes he needs to crucify himself, because what he remembers about his father, mercy, love, compassion, and he says, I'm not going to push it too far, maybe I can be a servant. He doesn't realize the father and who he really is. You see that? And the Jews hated him for it. So I'm going to show you a little video here. We're going to look at this. It's the Prodigal Son story told from Franco Zeffirelli's Jesus of Nazareth. It's my favorite video. And I love the way he tries to get people to understand that the heart of God is mercy and love and compassion. And this is our attitude when it comes to the gospel, because that's who he is. This whole idea here, Jesus Christ literally goes into this den of people that the culture looks at as being so horrible and so in orgies and everything. And Jesus is like, that's where I want to be, right? It's about reaching those who don't know God. And for you in particular, when you go through life and you have strongholds or sin in your life and you think somehow God is distant from you, he's not, because the heart of God is mercy. That's the heart of God as a good father. Does this make sense?